So I'm here logged back in on the student view of Nurture, and this is going to be a tutorial showing how the student closes the feedback on Nurture, which will close out the feedback loop, which is the final step they need to do to reach a maximum engagement score. So I'm going to show you first what they need to do, but I'm not going to show you how to do it. I'll just show you first this on desktop, and then I'll switch over to the mobile view and I will actually show you how they do it then, okay? So log back in on desktop here, and we can see here in Teams, in the general, in the post channel, that the teacher has given feedback. So we do add a post into here that the feedback has been provided. Unfortunately, we are not able to send a notification to the student when feedback is available. It's just a limitation of Teams at the moment. We are working on better ways to let the student know that feedback is available. But for now, the only way that they'll know is if you tell them that you've published their feedback, or if they come across it here in the posts tab, okay? So the student can click on view feedback, and this will just go to the Nurture app, or they can obviously click on the Nurture tab. I'll click login with Teams again. It might just prompt them to log in. I think it's just asking me to log in once more because I have to keep switching between my teacher and student account. But we can see here now that Shane's engagement score has gone up because the teacher has given him feedback, which is great, to 54.5. Okay, so they're ready. So if I click on review feedback or view assessment, we can see here, and remember I mentioned that these panels open up and they drop down and they open up, and the reason for it is that after teachers given feedback, we're going to automatically close the assessment and the learning outcomes and the student submission, even because they're not as important right now. What is important is the feedback, okay? So if I scroll down, I can see the personal comment that the teacher has given me. So remember, this is the one that we generated with the Nurture Assistant. Then we can see the learning outcome feedback. So this is exactly what the student needs to improve on. So it's going to say you need to work on number 1. So this will say how did you do and your next steps. Now there's no additional general feedback, and remember this was an attachment that we gave. So this is just a group level feedback. So this is the how did the students do, what was their next steps, and this comment is going to go to every single student that needed feedback on this one, okay? This particular student needs feedback on just learning objective 1 and 3, so that's why we call those out on top, what they can improve on. But we also say what you did well in was number 2, evaluate the moves towards European unity between this date and this. But because they did well in it, they don't need feedback on it, and we're not giving them feedback on it because they don't need to, they don't need feedback on it. The final step then is your reflection. So this is where they need to close out the feedback loop, okay? Now all they need to do here is they just need to, now their marks are not available yet because they need to unlock them, and they do that by closing out the feedback loop. All the student needs to do is just let me know with an emoji how they feel about the feedback, whether it's disappointed, neutral or happy. Now they can also add an additional comment, but this is optional at this point. And once they do this and click unlock grade, this will unlock the grade for them. Now I'm not going to do that here on desktop. I'll show you that in just in a moment using mobile. I just want to check something here. Just click back for a second. Yeah, that's okay. Perfect. So that's all the student has to do on desktop. I will quickly switch over to mobile and I will show you how they actually do it. So I'm back here on Nurture on the student side of the app, on mobile of course. So I'm here in Teams, and again I can see feedback has been given. Now I can click on the view feedback button, it will just bring me to the Nurture app. But other than that, the student can also click on apps, I believe, and we can see that Nurture is there. So just click on Nurture, and this will open up Nurture as a student. And great, right, so on Nurture we can still see our graph and our engagement score. Now I did not close out the feedback loop on desktop, but I'll show you how to do that now on mobile. Again, by default these panels are closed because they're not that relevant anymore, so the feedback is the most important. Now the student can go through the feedback in their own time, and an important one as well, for the engagement score they need to interact with any attachments that are on the learning objectives, okay? So again, that will be important. So if there's an attachment that the student hasn't opened or downloaded, or anything like that, that will have a negative impact on their engagement score, okay? Now all the student has to do is they need to, in this instance, they just need to tell us how they felt about the feedback. So let's say if I'm happy with the feedback, I will select that. Now the student can add any additional comments here for the teacher if they wish. We have found something which is really great about Nurture. One thing we've heard back constantly from teachers is students that are naturally quite shy or don't speak up a lot in class, they tend to give quite a bit of additional comments in here, or they would speak up more here because this is private comments between teacher and students. So that is something that we have heard to be quite a positive thing with Nurture as well, that we didn't intend that we didn't foresee coming, which is great. But yeah, they can add any additional comments if they want, but it's optional. Now, just quick point to note, if you selected the 3-2-1 response, they would still say how they felt about their feedback, but there would also be there would also be some additional boxes they would have to input. There'll be a question that will say, what are 3 things you learned? What are 2 things that 2 questions you're still left with, and 1 thing that surprised you, I believe, or something like that. So there's a couple of additional boxes they may need to fill out here, but once they have those filled, just click Unlock Grade, and then their result is unlocked. So we can see that I got 12 out of 20 on this. I was happy with the feedback, and that is it. That is how students close out the feedback loop, and that is all they actually need to do. In the next video, I'm just going to what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to switch back over to desktop for a moment and show you what this looks like on the teacher's end. Finally then, I'm just logged back into Nurture here as the teacher, in the teacher's view, just to show you what the reflection looks like from the students. So again, we can see the engagement score has gone back up to 10, which is great. This is just because only Shane has completed the reflection. I just want to go back and show you actually. So if I select Shane has an engagement score of 100 because he's gone through all of the necessary steps to achieve that 100% engagement score. Okay, but right, so I'm just going to go back into the assessments if I can. Wait, no, I just need to select all students. Okay, so if I click View Assessment, and if I go back in here, we can see that Shane has reviewed his feedback, is the only student to do so. Okay, so if I click on Review again and scroll down, I can see this is obviously the feedback that went to Shane, which is great. But we can see here that the student reflection that Shane was happy with the feedback. Okay, now if Shane or the student, if any of the student had given an additional comment with that, which I obviously didn't here, it will also appear on the student reflection. But that is how we can see what the student thought of the feedback, and that is the feedback loop closed. Okay, now obviously ideally you would have most students closing out this feedback loop. Just for the purpose of this demo, I don't, but that is everything you kind of need to know about the basics of Nurture, in terms of going from installing Nurture initially, setting up your classroom, creating your first assessment, right through to providing feedback and then closing out the feedback loop. Okay, now there's 2 more kind of well, I think there's 2, there might be more. There's a couple of more just additional videos I will add to this, which will include how to give feedback if you're using rubrics, and also how to use assessment templates, which we've made improvements to this year as well. I'm going to have some separate tutorials on those, but this closes out the basics of how you kind of go from 0 to 1 in terms of having never experienced Nurture before, to having an assessment completed and the feedback loop closed. Okay, so yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out.